Hi there, Chris van der Kerk here at Blue Rhino Safaris. When you do safari work, you travel through Africa, you're on tour a lot, you drive in sand, muddy conditions, things like that. There's always maintenance that you need to do on your vehicle. You have to remember that the vehicles are typically designed and built for general use, which means a little bit of off-road, a little bit of city driving, but not too much of one of them. So if you start doing more off-roading than you do down driving, then you have to remember that your maintenance frequency becomes more and it becomes more intense. Your brakes are not going to last that long. You need to make sure that everything is greased as it should. You're going to lose tires quicker. And it's all part of doing traveling in Africa. So we're going to have a look at brakes now. You might have heard, if you do 4x4 driving and the vehicle's brakes are hot, don't go through a river because the discs will warp and things like that. Those are all old folk tales, which is not untrue, but it's not quite the full story. You can create a lot more damage on your brakes without a river in sight. And I'll quickly show you the two main reasons for brake problems on the vehicle. So first thing we have to remember is that it's a very heavy vehicle, and if you take the kinetic energy of the vehicle and let's say it's designed to be 1.5 tons and you load it with your tent and everything and you've got a 3-ton vehicle, your kinetic energy increases. So the energy stored in the vehicle at speed is a lot higher than it was designed for. Now if I apply the brakes to come to a standstill or if I'm going down a hill and I need to hold the vehicle back, it means I'm burning a lot more on my pads than I should be. So if this pad is rated to 350 degrees Celsius, then this pad is going to overheat when I use my modified vehicle on it. So keep that in mind. Most safari vehicles are heavier than they're supposed to be, and therefore their brake pads are not quite what they should be doing. Now the manufacturers of the standard replacement brake pads that you can buy don't really give you an idea of the temperature they can handle, but they generally can't handle the temperatures that you need. So be aware of that. So there's two ways that you can really damage your vehicle, and you'll normally feel it as shuddering. So when you're braking at high speed, the steering starts shaking and you can feel something is wrong on your discs, and people say, oh, the discs are warped. Now that is in 99% of the cases not what is wrong. Your discs are not warped, they are still as straight as they can be. What happens is they've got spots on the disc which is higher and spots that is lower. So as your brake pads go around, they close, open, close, and you get that shuddering feeling on your brake pedal and on your steering. Now it happens for two reasons. One is, I worked on my vehicle, I fixed the hub and I got the grease in there, and I forgot to clean my discs with brake cleaner. Brake cleaner, a very important thing to remember. I didn't clean my disc properly, and therefore the grease that was on the disc, let's say I had some grease over here and I had some grease over there maybe. When I now apply my brakes back into normal off-road conditions, I'm doing normal driving, every time the brake pad goes over the greasy section, it slips, and then it grabs onto this section, then it slips and it grabs. So I create an unequal wear on my brakes. Now, because it slips there, it doesn't heat up that much, but I still need to stop the car. To stop the car, it now works double hard on the clean areas. If it works extra hard on the clean areas, it heats up more. When it heats up more, the structure of the steel starts changing. Now the steel here in the empty spots have now started to change into a harder version of steel. It's just normal metallurgy, so you can read it up in the book if you want to. And these harder pieces have a different rate of deterioration than the normal disc would have. So once those greasy sections are now gone, I'm stuck with hard sections and soft sections. And because the wear rate is different, as I drive, the disc wears away, and suddenly I'm getting shuddering. Every time the brake pad goes over one of those spots, it bounces, because the soft spots will wear away quicker and the hard spots will remain longer. The second thing is, if I overheat my brake pads, the face will glaze, and if the face glazes, you just generally heat up the disc. And you can see on this disc, it's blue. This disc has been destroyed, it's gone, and it's probably because of some other mountain pass that I just wasn't using my gears enough. So that's the first way that you can damage your disc, is by working on your brakes and using greasy hands. Using greasy hands when handling your pads, and not cleaning the disc with brake cleaner when you're done. Don't use copper slip on your wheel nuts. Copper slip, when it gets hot, gets very liquidy and it can flow onto your disc. Don't use copper slip on your calipers. Copper slip can do exactly what I just said. So when it gets hot, it will get onto the disc and then you'll destroy your rotors. Alright, the second way you can damage your discs is called transference. Now, if my brake pads are really hot, I'm going down a mountain pass, everything heats up, it gets very hot, and I get to the bottom of the mountain pass and there's a roadblock. And I apply my brakes and I hold my brakes waiting for the blockage to clear so that we can carry on driving. In that period, my very, very super hot pads are tied up against the brake discs because I'm on a downhill, I'm holding my brakes. A transference of brake shoe or brake pad material goes onto my disc in that spot because everything is so super hot at that point. When I move off again, this material has transferred just in that spot from my brake pad onto the disc. Now every time the wheel comes past, I have this little bit of a scratch where the brake pad has just transferred material. And because the surface is now not even anymore, I have uneven wear from there to where the brake pad sat and up again. You can normally see it. If that was the problem, you could normally actually see the pattern of the brake pad as it's imprinted on the disc itself. So it's very important. These discs are designed to cool down very quickly. They've got airflow, different types of designs that you get. So the idea of a brake disc is to cool down rapidly. That is why they are designed the way they are. But they need to have a bit of time to cool down. So let's say in 15 seconds they can drop down from the temperature that they're supposed to be to a more manageable temperature. But in that 15 seconds, if you apply your brakes and you're holding it, you can transfer brake pad material onto the disc. So it's very important. If you're driving and your brakes are really hot, you're doing downhills, the vehicle is heavy, it's steep, you know that your brakes are working. It's very important not to stop. If you see there's a roadblock in the road, slow down a little bit sooner and just allow the vehicle to move. All you want is the brake pad just to keep sliding. You don't want it to hold and transfer. So at a slow crawl, that lasts 15-20 seconds until you get to the stop. Just do a slow crawl as long as you can to keep the pad from transferring material onto the disc. That's very important. The same will go for your rear brakes, but the rear brakes is not that big of an issue because they do not do a lot of the braking. In these vehicles, discs in front, drums in the back, 90% of the braking will happen on the front. So it's your front brakes that you're really worried about. You can apply handbrake or as little pressure as you can. The fact that these things are so hot and this is so hot, the transfer will happen even if there's just a little bit of pressure. So what you want to do is just to keep moving, just at the slow roll. If your vehicle is one of those that gets hot brakes, so the guys behind you just have to realize that last 100 meters you're just going to roll to keep your brakes from transferring. And that is the two main reasons. So always keep in mind, if you're working your brakes very hard, you have to give your discs and your brake shoes time to recover. So you have to not use your brakes in that last little bit. When you come off the highway and you pull off onto the on-ramp, don't hold your brakes. If you brake hard for that last off-ramp section, just give your brakes a few seconds just to cool down. So keep it in mind, especially if you're on a heavy vehicle like you're doing safaris. That is another important point. This caliper must be loose. It must be able to move from side to side, and when relaxed, the caliper must reset itself into its position. You don't want a sticky caliper because it's going to drag on the disc. The disc is going to be preheated, and then when you come to a stop, suddenly this disc is extremely hot because you've been heating it by a caliper not releasing properly. So a few things to keep in mind, but that's the main reasons why you would destroy a disc. One would be transfer, and the other one would be handling this with greasy hands, or otherwise you have a dragging brake shoe because of a caliper that is not moving properly. Alternatively, rust. If you have a rust build-up on this, let's say the car was standing for a year and you've got rust on the discs, that rust will also cause spots where the brakes can grab and release, creating high spots. Now that ultimately leads to cracking. If you now have a high spot over here and you have a high spot over here, then this material essentially is different than the material there because of the heating and metallurgy around steel. And what you will get then is cracks that form right like that because of that area that is different in structure than the area next to it. So it's not uniform anymore and you start cracking discs. All these things just because of holding your brakes on the downhill or handling the disc with greasy hands. So keep that in mind. Make sure that your brakes are serviced properly, especially if you do mountainous conditions. Rwanda, Uganda, Lesotho, we have lots of mountain passes. Make sure that your brakes are new. Don't go with dodgy brakes, don't go with a brake that is maybe alright, because if that brake fails halfway through the tour, you can lose a brake shoe, and if you lose a shoe, you can lose the caliper, you can lose the disc, and it can cost you a lot of money. It's much better to take the old discs out, or the old, not the discs, the old shoes out, the pads, take the old brake pads out, put them in storage, and get yourself a new set. Put the new set on for the trip, and when that set is done, you can always use the old ones again. It's not a big issue. Brings me to my last point, the brake shoes that you buy. Don't go out to the nearest shop and buy yourself a pair of aftermarkets. Don't do it. You will cause trouble, especially if your vehicle is too heavy. The brake pads on the aftermarket stuff that you buy for 400 Rand a pair is not rated for the temperatures that you are going to do on a downhill in a mountain pass. Please be very aware of that. They are not rated for the high temperatures. The only way to get away from overheating your discs is to use the proper pads. So find someone that can give you a pad that is rated. Now, what you do is you take the weight of the vehicle and you look at the conditions that you'll be driving in, and someone will tell you that yes, this vehicle should have a 500 to 700 degrees Celsius brake pad designed for that, or 700 to 1000, and that means your brake pad can handle the temperatures, and that will in turn release the pressure on your disc. So the disc won't become blue because your brake pads are actually doing their job properly. So the combination of a right pad with a proper installed disc will give you good braking, no problems. But if you choose a cheap brake pad and you damage your disc, you're going to replace the disc and your pads, and you're not going to be able to stop for the rest of that trip. So yeah, I hope this helps. I hope you understand brakes a little bit better now and know where the shuddering comes from. It's not a warped disc. It's a disc that has high spots on it. So when I replaced my brakes recently, I chose a company called Power Brake. It's a company that supplies brakes. I think they supplied the brakes to the Dakar Hilux recently, and you can see these painted markings that they have on the disc itself. Now those painted markings changes color when it reaches certain temperatures, and that will give you an indication of the heat that the temperature has actually reached. So this is after my installation. I'm just checking the run out on the disc itself to see if it is fitted straight, and that is also very important when you are finally working on your brakes, is to make sure that the discs are running true. Especially when you replace them, they have to be seated properly, and yeah, so installation is rather important as well. So as I said, the nice thing with this, if you see these colors change, each color has a different temperature rating, then you can actually understand exactly how hot the brakes get when you've been driving, so you can select the correct brake pads. So this is a company called PowerBrake, and that's it. So drive safely, make sure your brakes are working, it's very important. To get going is important, to stop is also important. If you have any questions, please let me know, drop me a mail, phone me, and we can chat about a few things. Thanks for watching. Cheers.